Okay, so let's get started, you guys. Just to start off, I want to let everyone know my name is Greg Cummings with VPI, and I'm pleased to be your trainer for this session on gaining actionable insight from your interaction data. We want to thank you again for joining our new customer training webinar series that we've been running now for about 4 to 5 weeks, and we've been putting on these customer webinars to give our customers additional insight into the VPI application. So the goal of these is to highlight the features of the Empower Suite that are going to allow you to take full advantage of all the functionality that the tool offers you. Now, many of the features we'll be demoing will aid you in increasing your productivity, give you greater user effectiveness, and a general overall improved experience within the VPI application. So to avoid any interruptions, everyone's been placed in a listen-only mode. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the Q&A box on your screen. I will try to answer as many of the questions as possible at the end of the webinar within the allotted time frame. If I can't address something during the time today, I will make sure to get an answer back to you via email. After the webinar, you'll receive a brief survey, and we encourage you to fill this out and provide us with any input on the usefulness of the webinar and any suggestions for future topics. It's really important that we can gain that insight from our customer base and further develop the sessions that we present back to the users. It's really going to help us to shape what we provide and to give our customers the insight that they're looking for into the application. So if you can fill out that survey, it'd be greatly appreciated. So for today, I'm going to advance to our next slide here. We're going to focus on gaining actionable insights from your interaction data. And the topics we're going to cover are scheduling reports for automatic delivery, visualizing data with our heat maps and the associated actions we can take with those. It's a really neat feature. I'm not sure everyone is maybe actively using them or has seen them. But I'm going to show you some cool tricks that you can do with those heat maps. And also the ability to create ad hoc reports with what we call our analysis grid. So we've got 3 kind of reporting level elements that we're going to speak to today. The session is going to focus around how we gain insight into our interactions, right? We've got a lot of data that we collect in customer systems and environments, and we need to be able to do things with that data, report against it, visualize it, so we can actually take action against that information. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is jump right into the demonstration, and we're going to start stepping through each of these different areas that I've talked about. When I get into the scheduling of the reports for the automatic delivery, we're going to look at the report screens, talk about what a report looks like. I'll show you just a brief recap of that from a reporting side. Maybe some haven't seen that or are actively using the reporting. And then we'll talk about how to schedule those reports and then give you some ways that you can visualize those. We're going to do something similar with the visualization of our data in our heat maps by looking at what a heat map is, talking to the different elements, and then drilling down through there and showing you all the functionality within the heat maps. And again, with the ad hoc reports in our analysis grid, it's another reporting element. So this whole webinar today is focused on visualization of your data, how you can gain further insight into the interactions that are being collected in your environment. So we're going to have some good stuff here. All right, so I'm going to switch to bring up one of my applications, and I'm going to minimize that one. Okay. So what I've got up here now is I'm logged into the VPI system. This should be familiar to all the users that are on the phone with us. Everyone's got access to the VPI application, and all I've done was simply perform a standard interaction search, and it pulls me up to our interaction search view. Now, this is a good way to visualize our data, but this isn't any kind of a report format, right? This is just visualization of the data. We can do things with our data from here, and if you attended some of the previous webinars, my counterparts, Robin and Tamsin, and myself have shown you different things you can do with the interactions that are being collected. But what if we want to report against this information and also automate some of that reporting, right? We collect a lot of data in the application, and under the Interactions tab, we have a series of options that are available. One of them is Reports. Now, when we think about reports, we think about, right, running a report, visualizing data, and then maybe taking that report and saving it into a PDF or an Excel format. But if there's a report that you like to run on a regular basis, it would be kind of nice to have that scheduled and be able to maybe automatically distribute that report to a particular user base. This can speed up your efficiency, and save you some time and energy in having to run your common reports and distribute those to your user base. So when I select the reports view, from here we can see we have 4 standard interaction-based reports, right? These are on the interactions that are being collected and assembled by VPI. These are your calls that are being recorded, your screen captures if we're doing screen capture, and we're assembling those in interactions, and we want to get some reporting information off of that. For those of our users that don't maybe have a performance system like a Cisco UCC Express that would give you your key metrics like number of calls handled, average talk time, average handle time, we're going to give you a lot of that same information based off the interactions that we gather. From this reports view in the upper left hand, I'm going to run a simple report, an agent interaction trend report. Now, my report didn't generate any data for today, or we'd see that show up here. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is actually have my report generate some information back for me. So I'm going to show my filters up at the top. And again, this might be a recap for some of you that are new to the reporting element in VPI. When I show my filters, now I've got some selectable criteria that I can define that will return to me data based off of those parameters. When I select my today range, I'm going to go ahead and change this because I know where my data is in my demo system. And I'm just going to take it back quite a ways and hit refresh. And now I'm going to see that I've got some data in my report. This is a standard report, and I can run this on an ad hoc basis. I can run this report whenever I'm ready and I'm in the system. This report, just as kind of covering a couple things here, right? We're going to get to the scheduling piece, but I just want to talk to the report for a minute. I can see that I've got good data here for the date of 122, 123, and 125, the number of agents that are included in this agent trend report. I can, anytime you see an underline, right, this is a neat little trick, maybe not everyone knows this, anytime you see something that has an underline, there's usually some more action that you can take with that. Kind of think about when you see a hyperlink in an email or a hyperlink in different places on the web. Sometimes they're blue, sometimes they're underlined, and you can usually interact with those. And if I click on the agent 3, I'll get a drop down, and now it's going to show me the 3 agents that are comprised here. So I can start to do some validation of my data. The ones at the top here that are also underlined can give me some charts, and I really like this feature because I can select that, and it's going to actually embed a graph in here because I don't know about a lot of you, but I'm a visual person, and I like to see things, right, because that makes sense to me. I can visualize that information in a chart or a graph, so I can start to use my report and gain some further insight into the interactions my team is handling. I can tell that Greg handled a total of 6 calls that day, right? Speaking in the third person, I handled 6 calls that day. Total duration, my average call duration, minimum, maximum. So now I can start to gain some insight into the interactions that are being handled by my team. And I could further drill down into the different days, and I could even take it to an interval level. And I would say, you know what, I want to see these 17 total calls Greg handled that day. And now I can drill down into it. So I can get all the way down into an interval level style report by simply clicking through the options that are available. Now that I've run my report and I see that I've got good data and I have set my filters appropriately to encompass the right groups of people that I want to report against, the right day range, right, how I want to view my data. I've got the particular agents that I want to report against. So I've set all my filter values. I've got my report, and this is a good report, right? And I want to save this, but I also want to schedule it to be automatically run on a regular basis and sent out to particular people. Because I get this request from my manager on a regular basis, and instead of having to run it every Wednesday for the previous week, I'm going to set it up and have it do it automatically and enjoy my coffee in the morning. So the way to do that is in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, I've got the ability to save this report. And I can save this report and I can start to name it, right? That's the first thing I need to do. So as an example, I'm going to say Greg's team month-to-date interaction report. And I could put a description here, right? So month-to-date call report. And then if I wanted to schedule this for that automatic delivery, right, that kind of core thing that we're talking about here in this first portion of the webinar, I need to select the schedule report. And I'll get some additional expanded options available for me to make selections from. The first one is, what format do you want to send it in? Do you want to send it as a PDF? Or do you want to send it as an Excel spreadsheet? Obviously, if I send this report as a PDF, it's not going to be editable by the users that receive it. And that might be good. That might be what I want, right? They're just going to get a nice little PDF, going to show them all the data. But if I do want some people to potentially have the ability to manipulate that report, maybe add some charts or some graphs on their own independently, merge it with some other data, I might choose to send it as an Excel spreadsheet. So you've got two options there. Send a report via email is going to be checked by default, and now I can start to put in some user email addresses. So I'm going to go ahead and say I want this to go to Greg Cummings at VPI-corp.com. I'm going to put a comma, and I'm also going to send it to one of my counterparts, Robin. So I put her email address in, VPI-corp.com, and I could continue down this path and send it to multiple people. I could set a schedule for the delivery of this, how often I want it delivered. Do I want to just do it once, right? Just run this tomorrow, send it out, and then I can, right, just not worry about running it again. Or, like I was saying in my scenario, I want to run this weekly. And I want it to start on a particular day. So when I click Start Date, I'm going to get a calendar that appears, and now I can say when I want this to start. I want this report to start delivering next Wednesday, and it'll deliver weekly on Wednesday according to this schedule. The report will run at, I think it's 1 or 2 in the morning, and then deliver it out to the distribution list that you have set up. Now, if I don't put an end date to this, it's going to just continue to send the report every week until I choose to either delete this scheduled report or I modify it and include an end date. So for our purposes, we'll just demonstrate that we can include an end date. I can open this up, and then I can say I only want this to go to the day after Christmas when everyone won't be working. They'll be recovering from all the food that they ate the day before, but maybe they'll want to review their report while they're doing that. So I've got a start date of the 24th, I've got an end date of the 26th, and I've now populated my values to get this report scheduled. All I have to do from here is hit Save Report. And now that goes away and I'm back at my report view. So how do we do some management of this? Where do I see this? Right? I've got this report scheduled. I know what it's going to do. It's going to automatically start sending out this report that I've defined to the users that I've selected until the defined period that I chose it to stop sending, which would be, right, 12/26 of this year. One of the nice things about the VPI system, and we've gone through a session on this, everyone, is on the My VPI homepage, I can have a widget that displays my scheduled reports. So there's a specific widget within the application called the Scheduled Reports Manager, and it's showing me that this report that I just created is enabled, the title, right, the original report name, the report type, the emails it's going to be distributed to. It's currently not running. The next run is going to be on the defined date. The last run, it hasn't been run yet. And then last run status, I would have a check mark, right? Obviously a green check mark indicating that, yep, the report ran, everything was good to go. Some actions over here on the right-hand side within this widget are the ability to edit this task. If I wanted to change the values of when it runs, when it ends, who I'm sending it to, so you can make updates to that. You get a new manager comes on board or a supervisor, and you want to include them in this regularly scheduled report. We don't want you to have to recreate it. We want you just to be able to edit that particular task and then add them to the distribution, save it, and be able to redistribute. If I wanted to cancel this or delete this task and not have this report run anymore, I would simply delete the task, and now that would be gone from my list and it would no longer be a scheduled report. As a user, you can have multiple scheduled reports running. So I might choose to have an interactions report running on a regular basis that's being sent out. If you have some of our other core modules like our quality assurance, our coaching, right, you could also set up scheduled reports to be delivered within those modules. And it's the same simple steps that we just followed. Interactions, reports. Here's another way to view those tasks. If I come back to my reports view, on the right-hand side, you'll see under this My Interactions report, I'll have any saved reports that are associated with me, right, that I'm currently have saved and I might be running. And then I've got a Scheduled Reports Manager and a Saved Report File Explorer. If I go into my Scheduled Reports Manager, this is going to now show me a listing of all of the scheduled reports that I currently have in the system that I have created. So this is another good way to visualize any of those saved reports that you're currently running. I'm going to quickly walk through those steps one more time because as any of you guys that might know me, I like to repeat myself and just do that for understanding. If I go back to my reports view, I run a particular report like an agent interaction trend. I define my report values for how I want it to display by setting my date and time parameters, setting my groups and my agents. Once I am comfortable with the data that I'm viewing, if I want this to be sent out on a regular basis, in the upper left-hand corner, I simply save this report, name it, set it to schedule, define my values, input an email address to have it sent to, choose my duration or how often, my frequency, deliver this monthly, starting tomorrow, and let's have it end right at a particular end date. So now I have scheduled another report. When I go back to my primary widget on my VPI homepage, I should see I've got now 2 reports listed. Here's the first one we made collectively, and then here's the second one we just made. Scheduling reports should improve efficiency, should allow you to distribute to a large group of people that should receive this report, and then they can do what they need from there with that data. If you need to edit the task or you want to stop that report from continuing to run, from the Schedule Report Manager widget, you can either edit the particular task or delete it, or to get to that same view from the Interactions Report view, you can, over on the right-hand side of your screen where you've got more specific information about your reports and saved reports that you're running, click into your Schedule Reports Manager, and now you can also take action against those. Great way to get additional automation from the application. I'm all about automation, speeding up the process, giving you further insight into your data and further sharing capabilities with your team members. Okay, if you guys have any questions on that, plug those into the Q&A box, send them over, and we'll answer those at the end of the webinar. The next thing I want to look at, all right, we're going to dive into, right, because we just talked about our scheduling reports for automatic delivery. That was the first item on our agenda today. Now we're going to move into another way to visualize data, right? So this was visualizing data from a report perspective and then automating it. Now we're going to talk about how we visualize data with our heat maps and the associated interactions we can perform from there. I have done, again, an interaction search. Right? We've all done this before using the VPI application. We've got our interaction results displaying. I've got a lot of good data here. Now down here at the bottom, we're all used to the interaction overview, right? The media player view with that sparkly Tinkerbell effect. We've got a details view, which shows us details about the interactions. We've got an analysis grid, which we're going to get to in a few minutes. And then we've got this heat map area. And maybe you haven't been in there very often, maybe this is something you do use, but this is what we're going to speak to next. When I select heat map, the system is going to load the data from my search results. And this is a key concept for everyone to understand. If you do a search and return, like I'm highlighting in the middle right-hand portion of the screen, a certain amount of records, like I've got 128 records currently displayed in my results area, those are the records that will be displayed in your heat map. So take that a step further and look at it from the perspective of if you have data for a month that you want to visualize in a heat map, you would simply run your search for a month time frame, whatever time frame you wanted to view your data in. The heat map is a great tool. It gives you the visibility into your data in a heat map format. What that means is that the size and the color actually do tell us something. The size of the cell over on the right-hand side defines the interaction count. And with this heat map, the cell color also defines the interaction count. So the larger the cell and the darker the green, the more interactions someone has handled. Now think about that in a real-time application. If I was a manager, supervisor, maybe a workforce management analyst, and I wanted to kind of get a snapshot of how my staff is doing today or my center is doing today, maybe I just run my interaction search and I've got all the calls for today that we've handled as a group, and that might be 1,000 or 2,000 or 100 or 200, right? When I select the heat map, I immediately know that Greg Cummings has handled the most calls today. And I also know that the Jeff Visker profile has handled a smaller amount. Eddie Curran, Greg Avalos, Christine Barbie. By just looking at this, I know where my staff is performing, right, from the number of interactions that they've handled. So just visually, by the cell size, tells me that. Now that's pretty cool. I didn't have to run a report to get that. I didn't have to count anything one by one. I didn't have to filter my results to know who's doing what. I can just look at it from the heat map perspective. Now that's one view into the heat map. But we can also use the heat map as a filtering aid. Now you might think, well, what does he mean by that? And that's a very good question, right? What does he mean by a filtering aid? The heat map is interactive. Let's say that I wanted to see all of the calls or interactions that are associated with Don Merrick. Now, traditionally, I could use my filters, right, to filter the data and find just calls for Don Merrick. And I could do that. That takes me a couple clicks and be really easy to get those records to show up. But from the heat map view that we're looking at now, I could simply select the cell and left click on it and watch what happens to my interactions. They change, and it now gets down to just the interactions where agent Don Merrick is a part of it. Up in the right-hand corner, if you take your eyes to the upper right of the screen, you'll see that we've zoomed in on agent Don Merrick. I'm looking at all the interactions that Don Merrick is associated with. I can easily jump back up to today's interactions, and now I'm back to my core primary view of looking at everything that happened for today. A great filtering tool, right? It's a good way to just drill down and see everything for a particular person. Maybe I want to understand Matthew Claudin, what he's been doing today. I simply left-click his cell, my results view changes, and I can see all of his interactions, right? And then I can jump back up to today's interactions. Heat map, good interactive utility, gives you immediate visibility so you can have some quick understanding of the calls that are being taken by your staff. And then also you can drill down into it and gain further insight into the interactions handled by a particular person. And I haven't even touched a filter. I might have had 1,000 calls here and wanted to see just the calls for Craig Harrison, and I could simply drill down into it and then jump back up a level by zooming back out. Drill down, drill back up. Heat map, great tool. We have heat maps embedded as part of the quality module, coaching, right? These modules from the search evaluations area will give you that heat map view. As an example, when I select it from here, I went to my quality search, selected the heat map, and now I can see from the quality perspective, right? It's grouping it by agent. I can group it by evaluator. So now I can see, based on the 464 evaluations that have been performed, Don Merrick has performed the most evaluations. So this is like an ad hoc productivity report for understanding who is performing the evaluations, right, the most within your system. Great tool. Drill down from here. Now I can see all of the evaluations that Don Merrick has completed. And look where it took me when I just did that. I zoomed into Don Merrick, and I can see all of his evaluations, which are 79. Now it showed me the status. Don Merrick has 4 that are finalized, right? And I'm looking at that from the little drop-down box, right? 44, strike that, 44 that are finalized, and 34 that are in progress, and then 1 that is in review. So it can show me the status. So again, a nice ad hoc report view into your heat map data. Let me zoom back up to today's evaluations. When I do my grouping by, I can do agent, status, evaluator, events. Let's go to status. Out of those 464 evaluations, what statuses are they in? For anyone using our quality module, we know that we've got finalized status for an evaluation, in progress, evaluations that are scheduled, evaluations that are in review. So I can quickly see that my staff has the majority are scheduled or finalized. I want to see the ones that are scheduled. That's where I know who's doing their work, right? We automatically like to distribute those assignments so people are actively working on their evaluations, right? And without having to do that hunt and peck methodology. I can see all the ones that are scheduled, and now I can go and start sending some emails out. Hey, Joe, you've got 5 scheduled to be done today. How's that coming along? Do you need some help with those evaluations? And I've gained all this insight by just using the heat map. I didn't have to run a report. I didn't have to manually, right, search for specific interactions or evaluations. All I did was start to drill through and use the capabilities of the heat map to gain insight into that data. For one last thing I want to show you on the heat maps, everyone, before we transition into the ad hoc reporting for the analysis grid, is from our administrative area for any of our admins, we have this heat map functionality within our audit event search. So if we've got any admins on the phone, this is a little tidbit for all of you. I can actually see from here the heat map, all of my users and what they're doing in the system. I know that Don Merrick, right, has probably logged in more than anyone else. He's got more events. He's had more interaction with the application. Mike Fritz, Craig Harrison, Tamsin, Mike Hensley, I can actually see who's performing what actions most commonly within the system. And then if I wanted to group this by event type, I can see that most of my people, by looking at this view, perform media playback because that is the largest cell. The event count correlates to cell size. Most of my people are just playing back calls when they get into the system. A lot of them are logging in, file attachments, performing evaluations, annotating, saving media. When I hover over, I get those values that show up. How many times did this event actually occur? We can see that in this system, we've played back 1,590 calls. Really good information from here from this heat map perspective. All right, let me just quickly recap that before we move on to the analysis grid. From the interactions view, I performed a search. When I load my heat map, it's going to grid my data into a heat map, and I can start to take further insight into this data by drilling down into it. Good way to gain that further level of insight into your actionable data. Okay, again, like I said earlier, if you have any questions about the heat maps, please put them into your Q&A box, send them on over, and we'll start to answer those in a few minutes. The last thing that we're going to cover today is the ability to create ad hoc reports with what we refer to as our analysis grid. Again, this might be an area that a lot of our users haven't necessarily broached yet or maybe taken full advantage of, but it's a really, really great tool. So when I'm in my application and I'm at my interaction search view, I've got my data, right, in the system. From here, we talked about the heat map, but to the left of that, we've got this analysis grid tab. And this is one of my favorite tools, right? But I'm kind of a geek like that, and I like this kind of stuff. When I select the analysis grid, it loads up, and you're going to see what this is going to look like. It's going to kind of look like this Excel type format. It's got this grid and a lot of data included in it. This is a tool that allows you to take all of the data that you have in your current search, just like we did with the heat map, right? We would need to search for a range of data that we wanted to analyze. And then when we select the heat map, strike that, when we select the analysis grid, that information is going to get loaded into this analysis grid. For ease of viewing our data, I'm going to use one of these little arrows here to expand this to the top. And now you can see I've covered up my interaction search results, but I've got much more real estate to play with now while I'm working in my analysis grid. The analysis grid, by definition, is an ad hoc reporting tool. It allows you to manipulate the data and then save a formatted template so you can use that same template format in the future, and then export this as either a PDF or an Excel, right, so you could send it off to someone. A question that you might be asking yourself, and maybe someone's plugging it into the Q&A box, is can you schedule these to be delivered? And it's a great question if anyone thought of it. Unfortunately, you cannot schedule your analysis grids to be automatically sent because this is a tool for ad hoc report creation, and then it's always going to be based on the interaction data that you are particularly searching. The first thing we want to do when we're looking at our analysis grid is just talk to some of the different action areas in the upper portion. As an example, we can create and define formulas, which I'll get into in a minute. We can modify the layout, right? Layout, when I say layout, I mean the actual layout that we're looking at here. All the different tables that we're actually referencing, we can modify what that layout's going to look like, because there might be some data here that isn't relevant to me or to the people that I might want to send this ad hoc report to. We can start to sort our data, right? Kind of like an Excel function, right? How do I want to sort it? We can filter data out that I don't want to include. We can group data, and this will all make sense in a minute when we actually start to show you some of these functions. We can aggregate things like give me a sum or an average or a count. We can add charts. We can add crosstab views, which I like to refer to kind of as our pivot tables. So we can add a lot of charting and graphing into the system, and also some crosstab views for these ad hoc reports that we're running. The first thing we want to do is over on the right, we want to actually create a template which is going to save these settings that we start to define. When you're making an analysis grid, you always want to start by defining a grid template. When you select Add, you're going to get a little box that's going to pop up, and it's going to say, what would you like to name this? So I'm going to call this Team Greg MTD Ad Hoc Report. And I'm going to select OK. Now you're going to notice that a new button is going to appear once this finishes refreshing, and I'm going to have a big Save button there because I'm going to save this template view once I'm done building it. Let me get into showing you some of the ways that we can actually build and use this, because right now when you look at this data, a lot of it doesn't look all that usable. I want to put it in a more usable format. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to group my data, and I want to group it by agent. So all of the columns that are listed here are the columns that are available in the table that we're currently referencing. So I want to group this data first by agent name. When I select Add, watch what's going to happen. This is going to be pretty neat. In a second, it's going to refresh itself. And then you're going to notice that the actual button that we interacted with, the group button here, went kind of a light yellow or a gray color, telling me that I have a function defined here. I'm going to select on that, and it's going to collapse. And look what I've done. I've actually grouped it based on the agent, right? In this case, we have an agent named Case ID, but then we've got Greg Cummings. So now I can see all of Greg's calls. Instead of them kind of out of order, I can actually see I've put some order in place. Matthew Claudette, Greg Cummings, and this gray bar represents where the breaks are between the different values. Now I want to add an aggregate because I want to know what my average duration is of my call. Let me aggregate that. data column, audio duration, or we'll just use the duration one up here at the top. What kind of function do I want? Do I want it to give me an average, standard deviation, count, min, max? I want an average. Hit add. It's going to process. Once it's finished, we're going to see it's going to add its values to the lower portion. The button has gone back to a yellow-gray kind of color. And now I can see the very top bar is the entire selection. So overall, my calls are 366 seconds on average. For this user, Greg Cummings, his average time is 118 seconds. And now I can see for each of my users, Matthew Claudet's average is 52. So now I've got an average, overall average, individual average. Let's add another function. I want to get rid of some of these columns because there's just too much data here, right? This data, I don't need a lot of this information. I want to just kind of pare this down a little bit. So I'm going to go into my layout, and now I can start to actually remove columns that are unnecessary. I can get rid of things like, let me scroll down here a little bit more, audio agent ID, number dialed, extension, flag, and I can start to update these columns, right, this layout view that I'm looking at, and I can remove a bunch of these that are check marked, and your view might look a little different in your system, but again, the message is that you can update the view that is being displayed, and when I hit OK in the lower left-hand portion there, look what happened to my view. Now it's changed quite a bit, and it looks a little bit better. It's more manageable from a report perspective. And I've added multiple functions. Layout, I've changed the report layout. I've added a grouping based on the agents. I've added an aggregate to give me an average of my duration column. And now I want to add one more thing here, which is a crosstab view. And I want to say, kind of like a pivot table, the header value will make the start time, and I want to view it by day. The label column will be agent name along the left. The aggregate value we're going to take is going to be duration, and I want it to give me an average. When I add this, down at the very bottom of our screen, once it refreshes, we're going to see that we're going to have a nice looking little chart. Down here in the lower left, agent name, right? Down here, start time along the top. Each day is listed, each agent is listed, and then what their average was. So now I've got a nice little report view in a crosstab format, kind of like a pivot table, where I can now use that as part of my overall report. Once you've defined your analysis grid report, you've got some options to export your data either as an Excel, CSV, or a PDF. And also with the crosstab views that you add, you can export those specifically as Excel, CSV, or PDF. Again, bringing those outside the system in a report that you could send to someone. When I hit save from here and save this, would I like to save my layout, right? It's going to give me that option to save it. And then now I've got a template that I can always refer to that has the defined values that I've set up. The layout the way I defined it, the grouping the way I defined it, the summing or the averaging, my crosstab view, any data that I search for in my results section, I can now load into this predefined template that I've built and have an ad hoc report at my disposal. Another great utility. Really encourage everyone to get their hands on it and start to use it a little bit. We also teach some advanced classes on how to use the analysis grid because it is a very powerful utility. We can do some custom formulas in the system using some VB scripting language and building formulas. We've worked with customers to create scorecards where they give agent points based on the data that's been collected. So we've got a lot of flexibility and things you can do with your analysis grid. This was a scratch at the surface to give you guys some further insight into how you can use your data to effectively manage the users that are being recorded. Okay, that takes me through the three core areas that I wanted to cover. So in closing, I'm going to recap and then we're going to open up for questions for everyone. So I hope this webinar has obviously been informative and that you've learned some new ways to report and view the data, right? That was the goal here. We talked about the ability to schedule reports for automatic delivery, save that time every day or every week, get those reports scheduled and automatically sent out. Using your heat maps to navigate through and gain further insight into the data. I showed you a lot of things with the heat maps where I simply loaded a heat map and was able to drill through multiple levels and understand my information without having to run a report, do specific custom filters or searches. I gained all that from the heat map. And then we talked about the ability to use our analysis grid to again gain further insight into the information that's being collected and creating ad hoc custom reports. All right, so what I'm going to do now is go ahead and open it up to, I'm going to bring back my presentation and just take us to the last slide here. So for any information that you want to follow up, I put some information here for two of our sales contacts if you did have any information about upgrading or about these features that we've discussed. And then we'll also open it up now for questions from the group. Okay, if there are any questions from any of our users, I encourage you to ask them now. It's a great opportunity to go ahead and send your questions in. Okay, it doesn't look like I have any questions coming through at this time. I'll be on the line for another couple minutes if anyone does want to send a question through. Oh, here one that came through. Give me one sec. Can I have multiple analysis grids? And that is a great question. Yes, you can have multiple analysis grids. You're creating the templates like I was showing. So if you were to create a template and name it something, you'll always have that add button to the left of the template drop down where you can add an additional analysis grid template. So great question. Yes, you can have multiple analysis grids. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pull this back up. We'll go back to our final slide here. And there's some information for me, everyone. Again, I want to thank you for attending our webinar series. I hope you gained some valuable information from this. Please look for additional webinar series notifications to be coming out to you as our users, and we will continue to do these. Please take a few moments to fill out the post-webinar survey. It really helps us to understand how we're doing. We need that feedback from you, and also helps us to understand what future webinars you would like to see us present. With that, I want to bid everyone a farewell and a good afternoon, and thank you again for